couple of things that I do want to share with you is we do have some new people that are joining the class, some via Zoom, some will be on ground. John Moore is online on Zoom with us tonight, but he plans to attend here most of the time. Steve Barney, he's in Jamestown tonight, so hopefully he'll be able to get on. But anyway, we do have some more people that are going to be joining us, and so we're glad of that as we expand and we grow. For those of you that have been taking classes, we do have your grades for your first module done. I'll email you all. I'll email you the grades so that you will know what it was. And may I set your minds at ease, saying you did better than I thought it was going to turn out. Yay. And so that's good news. And then we'll do grading on the second class very soon here. But anyway, that way you'll at least know how you're doing and how things are going. So we're going to email you those grades. My wife finished her grading the other day, and I finished mine on the first module. So we will send those out. We are the first class, and Trina, it's good to have you. I'm not sure you can hear me yet. You probably can. Another person that's joining us here. And I'm going to go over a few things about registration and stuff in a few minutes. I'm going to wait and see if some more people arrive before I do that. But the first class in this module is leadership. I'm going to mute your mic, Trina. There, I muted you. Just open it when you need to talk. First class is leadership. And this class is going to be a very interesting one. I'll talk about it a little bit later. Second class is ministerial ethics. And some of you take both classes. Some of you just take one of them as you process through. But let me just say this for those of you that are trying to decide what class or classes to take this module. Neither one of these classes are heavy as far as work. There is some reading, but it's interesting reading. It's easy reading. Neither one of them are going to be extremely hard academically. So if you're thinking of taking two, this might be a good one to do it. But the first class, which is leadership, a lot of it I'm not even teaching. We're going to watch videos by John Maxwell teaching his 21 irrefutable laws. Then I'm going to be discussing in between them a little bit, bringing out some of the major points. And so it's going to be very interesting. And it's always best if you can hear the person who wrote the book teach the class. And so that's what we're going to be doing in this class. That being said, I want to go over the leadership syllabus with you so that you'll know what's expected of you, in this class. And let me just pull this up here. You ought to be able to see that on the screen. Let me make it bigger for you. This is already on the website, and I will also email it to you so that you have a copy of it to your email. But we do want to go over it tonight so you know exactly what's required of you. I'm going to be doing both classes this module, and because sometimes my wife does the leadership, but I always do the ministerial ethics, and I'm just going to be doing both of them. The course description. It's a course of leadership principles using Maxwell's DVD set and companion book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, as well as lecture and discussion that's going on. For those of you that have not seen it, this is a copy of the book. Hopefully you have already received your book, gotten it. If you haven't, you need to do so ASAP. Secondly, may I say that I do have one copy of the book left. If somebody doesn't have theirs, I do have one copy that I could sell somebody fairly inexpensively. And so if somebody needs it, let me know. But you can get it on Amazon, and you need to get it sent to you as soon as possible so that you can be reading the material. You do not have to have the workbook. You can purchase the workbook if you want to. The problem with that is there's more than one workbook out there, and sometimes the workbook people get does not coincide with the sets. So I'm just going to ask you to take notes as we go through today. And if you don't have your book, you need to get it as soon as possible. The course requirement meets both the Generation School and Ministry core curriculum requirements, as well as credentialing requirements for the Assemblies of God and other Pentecostal denominations. Course objectives. Yeah, you're going to be able to assess your own leadership skills to determine areas of weakness, because a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Mm-hmm. We all have strengths and we all have weaknesses. And you're going to be able to assess what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses and determine how to move forward from there. You're going to understand leadership principles and apply them to your own life. It's going to prepare you for being a leader which others will follow. One of Maxwell's famous sayings is, if you think you're leading and nobody's following, you're just going for a walk, you know. And so you want to be a leader that others can follow. It's going to train and equip, help you train and equip others for leadership. Establish leadership life principles to enhance your service in God's kingdom. Teach you organizational skills. Help you and those you lead reach your God-given potential. And help you to be able to teach these same leadership skills to others. As I said, the textbook are John Maxwell's The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And I want you to either read 1 Minute Manager by Ken Blanchard or Leadership is an Art by Max Dupree. Not both of them, just one of them. And those two books are both very good books. They're both very easy reading. They're both small books. But you're going to read one of those two books, so you need to be sure you get that as well. The class is made up of lectures, class discussion, and presentations. We meet on Tuesday nights at 5:30. Course requirements, course attendance and participation, a leadership book report. Choose one of those above books, either by Blanchard or Dupree, for your book report. It must be typed. You're going to write a 2 to 3 page book report, and that's always means double spaced, with giving, number 1, a brief summary of the book, number 2, your evaluation of the book, and number 3, your application, how you plan to put these concepts from the book into practice in your life, specific ways you plan to do it. Please give your name, date, and class on the top left corner of the first page. Also list the book title, author, publisher, and city, date of publishing below your info across the first page. And also give a heading to each of the 3 sections: summary, evaluation, and application. You give those headings as you're writing your 2 to 3 page book report. The second thing is there's a leadership movie that we want you to watch. I want you to watch one movie from the approved class list and view the movie as you fill out your evaluation paper only after the 3rd week of the class, but I prefer you to do it before the 4th week. And you will turn in your evaluation paper in class. In a minute, I'll go over what those movies are and how I'm wanting you to evaluate it. And number 4, a final exam. And your exam is going to be 21 questions with a question from each law, and then 4 essay questions regarding this course and or leaders. The essay questions will be questions such as, just giving you an example, what's your biggest strength and your biggest weakness when it comes to leadership? What are 3 things you've learned from this class? Something of that nature. Other than that, it's going to be 1 question per leadership point. Okay. Course grading. Just being present and participating is 20% of your grade. Your book report is 25%. The leadership movie assignment is 25%. And the final exam is 30%. Extra credit. If you read both extra books on leadership with book reports, you get extra credit. Okay. Late work, that's normal. I'm not going to go over that right now. Plagiarism. Please read all of this as you get into it. Your class schedule, that says Mondays. That should say Tuesdays. Sorry, I didn't see that. Made that mistake. It's Tuesdays from 5:30 to 7:30. We're going to go over the syllabus, and we've got the chapters there. Basically, what we're going to do is just go over as many of the leadership laws as we can tonight, and do the same the other nights. Your book report is due April the 2nd, and your final exam will be April the 16th. Okay. And that's all. No, there's my contact information. There's the I do.
Call at 2 in the morning.
Do not call me at 2 in the morning. So any questions on any of that? Either from people right here in the class or people on Zoom. Any questions? I want you to be sure you know what's required in the class. So you can see this is a very simple class. Not a lot to it as far as a lot of work.
This is the class I was looking forward to the most.
It's a very fun class. You will enjoy this. Nothing else? Okay, what I'm going to do now is I am going to go over the where is it? The movie assignment. I think those on can see that assignment on there, correct? Here it is. The movie's listed below. And what you're going to do is you're going to identify leadership principles throughout the movies. Name those characters who displayed these characteristics. Identify the positional leaders. Identify the real influencers or the leaders. What's the difference between a positional leader and a real leader, an influencer?
Somebody, a Taco Bell manager is a positional leader.
Whether or not they're an influential leader or not. They've got the position. They've got the title. Okay, so identify the positional leaders, then identify the real influencers or leaders. And how did influence play the key roles? What changes were necessary to make the character a successful leader? And what did you learn as a leader from this movie? There's 4 of them you can choose from. Amazing Grace, U571. There is some foul language there, so they're just wanting you to know. If you don't want to listen to that, don't use that book. Remember the Titans and Glory. You can choose one of those 4. Okay, and then you're answering those. You're answering these as you're watching it.
Are you going to email that to us?
I will email that to you as well. Okay. And in fact, I have some of these. I have most of these movies, I think. I have DVDs of most of these movies.
What's the DVD?
Maybe I'll bring those. Maybe I'll bring those with me for those who want to borrow. Any questions from anybody in class here or on Zoom? If you have a question on Zoom, just unmute your mic and talk to me about any of this stuff. Okay. We do have Trina new to the class today, and John Moore new to the class. John is going to attempt to be in class as much as possible. He just wasn't able to tonight. So we'll have 2 Johns, and I think they both spell it Jon, I believe.
Oh,
and
great.
And
you're saying
so For those of you that are joining via Zoom tonight that are just starting the classes, and you may be just checking it out tonight, or maybe you've already made your decision, but I want you to correspond with me via email tomorrow if possible, to let me know if you do plan on taking the class and which class or classes, and then we can work out the registration on it. That way I can send you the syllabus and everything if you're interested in taking it. Okay? Yes, John.
Last week you mentioned some of the reference letters are still out. Are there still some out?
Still some out. I haven't checked the mail in the last couple of days, so I'll check it again. But those of you that are, yes, you need to be processing your application. Some of you have not finished it yet. You've still got the reference forms that need to come. Those of you that are just joining, if you did not get an application yesterday or Sunday, if you did, you can be filling it out. If you didn't, you can go to gensum.org and download one. That's GENSOM.org. Let me go ahead and put that on the chat board there for you. You can go to it always wants to change it.
Always.
And you can go to that website and download it, gensum.org, and you can start working on your application. And you can take these first courses though, even if that is not happening.
You got
Yes.
any of them back?
Yeah.
Some?
You're only missing the education or business.
Either an educator or a boss.
So you got one from my father-in-law
Yes.
and one from Pastor Chris.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was at your father-in-law's church Sunday.
Huh?
I was at your father-in-law's church Sunday.
He was telling me you gave all the seniors a hard time.
Gave who?
The seniors a hard time.
Imagine that.
I shared something, and he said, "Please let everybody know I didn't ask you to do that." I said, "No, he didn't ask me to do it." No. So, okay. So here we go. If you guys are ready, we're going to get started here. And what I want to do is I want to we're going to watch this video, and there's a bunch of them on here. Between each one, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to share some things that I think are important. I want you to share maybe a couple things that you think are important. We don't want to spend too much time, because if we do, we're not going to get through all 21 laws. But we do want to spend enough time to where we catch them, okay? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start it, and as soon as he's through the first one, I will stop it, and we'll go from there. And I just want to be sure that Jenny, you can help me here. I'm going to let you unmute your mic, and or give me. You don't even have to do that. Just give me a high sign if you guys can both see it and hear it. Okay.
The true measure of leadership is
good.
influence. Nothing more, nothing less. The law of intuition gives you a head start on everybody else. And the law of navigation says anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. It is with great joy that I spend a few hours with you teaching you the 21 irrefutable laws.
Be sure you take notes on all of this.
I welcome every one of you here today, because this lecture has potential to help you to become a better leader, to change your life. And somebody asked me recently, they said, "John, how long did it take you to write the book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership?" And I know I shocked them, because I looked at it and said, about 20 years. Now, people know I'm slow, but that's really slow. What I was really saying to them is a book like The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership has to be birthed with a lot of experience. In other words, there are some books you don't write real quickly. There are some books you just kind of let them marinate and let them simmer so that you can truly bring out the laws. And the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership was kind of formed in not only the process of time, but about 5 years ago, I sat down one time and I asked myself, in leading people for 20, 25 years, what lessons have I learned about leadership? What principles, what thoughts have I learned that really would make a difference? And what I came to the conclusion was this, that there are a lot of wonderful leadership thoughts, there are a lot of leadership principles. But when you start boiling down to laws, there are just a few of them. And I would like to talk to you about the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, and I would like to begin in your workbook by sharing with you how these laws were qualified. How do we qualify these laws? How do we turn around and say, okay, these are more than principles, these are more than leadership thoughts, these are truly laws. And I'm going to share with you in your notes the qualifying test to become a leadership law. For example, number one, these laws are not based on culture, gender, or age. Simply stated, these laws cross all type of cultures. And I know that because I have taught the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership in over 20 countries. And no matter whether I'm in India or the Philippines or South Africa, it doesn't matter. These laws cross right over. In other words, people there say, oh my goodness, that applies to me. And for it to be a law, it has to cross culture, it has to cross obviously gender, and it has to be able to be applied to all ages. The second qualifying test to become a leadership law is the fact that they relate and apply to all communities. When I say all communities, we've taught the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership in the business community, the academic community, the religious community. Hey, we've even taught the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership in the government community. Whoa, that's a real accomplishment, okay? And I remember a couple of years ago, the Department of Transportation Secretary called me up and said, I want you to come and bring in the top 500 people in the DOT all over America, and we've been studying the 21 laws. We want you to come in and teach. And I had an incredible day with them. But these laws cross over all communities, all genders, all ages, all cultures. That's what makes the law. Qualifying test number 3, they're recognized by other leaders as leadership laws. In other words, one of the things I did in the process of writing this book and preparing this lecture is the fact that I sat down with other leaders and I said, let me ask you a question. Do you think this is a leadership law? And often, many times, these key players would look at me and say, oh, you know what, John, that's a great thought, but let me give you an exception. It doesn't work over here. And I'd say, hey, you're exactly right. It doesn't work over here. So other great leaders came around me and really helped me to form what I call these 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. And then qualifying test number 4, they stand the test of time. You can take these irrefutable laws of leadership and you can put them in this century, you can put them 5 centuries ago. In fact, I have a wonderful friend, Jim Garlow, who just finished writing a book, and it's an incredible book, where he takes the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership and he takes people throughout history, going back to thousands of years, and he talks about how many of them violated the law, how many of them applied the law and were successful with it. And I've had the time of my life just reading this book because all of a sudden I'm seeing the 21 laws as they operated in the times of Caesar and in the times of the Civil War. The laws, they stand the test of time. Now, let me make just 3 or 4 observations quickly about the laws. Observation number 1 is, and here's the good news, I love this one. These laws can be learned. You and I can learn these laws. And the reason I know that is because I've taught these laws for many, many years, and I could literally put names behind every law. In other words, I could literally sit down and say, with this law, I've mentored and taught people this. They've learned these laws. These laws can be learned. Now, just take a moment with the studio audience here. Here's what I want you to know. As I go through the 21 laws of leadership with you, there are some you're going to do well, there's some you aren't going to do well. Don't get discouraged because you can learn the law. You can apply yourself and you can learn it. In fact, let's just take a time out for a moment. Look at your neighbor and tell your neighbor, even you can learn these laws. Go ahead and tell them. Even you. In fact, look at your neighbor, look back at your neighbor and say, in fact, this is the reason I brought you today. Yeah. I was certainly hoping that you could learn these laws. Okay. The second observation I want to make is this. These laws stand alone. What I mean by that is, it's possible in law number 2 that you don't do well. Law number 3, you do well. It's not like building a house where you put brick upon brick. They truly do stand alone. And when I say they stand alone, Each law has the possibility of helping you, or each law has the possibility of hurting you, but they're not dependent upon other laws. They don't build on each other. They all stand alone. Observation number 3 is that these laws carry consequences. Now, let me explain to you exactly what I mean by when I say these laws carry consequences. About a year ago, I was lecturing on the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, and a guy came up to me, and I'll never forget, he looked at me and said, I just finished reading your book, and he said, I just want you to know, John, I don't agree with one of your laws. And when he told me that, I looked at him, and I smiled, and I said, I don't care. And that kind of threw him for a loop, because I think he thought I would care. And he looked at me and said, what do you mean you don't care? I said, I don't care if you don't agree with one of those laws. He said, well, what do you mean by that? I said, well, they're laws. Whether you agree with them or not, it really doesn't matter. It's kind of like the law of gravity. Somebody coming up to you and saying, I just don't buy into the law of gravity. I don't care. But I tell you what, go up to the 3rd story with me. Jump out. In a millisecond, you will buy into the law of gravity. See, the laws are the laws. And the laws, they don't ask you to buy into them. They just tell you that if you do buy into them, you're going to prosper. And if you don't buy into them, it's going to hurt you. These laws have consequences. So let me tell you one of my favorite stories. It's the story of 2 guys. They weren't good golfers. I love to play golf, so I love golf stories. Okay, 2 guys. They're not good golfers, and they get up on the first tee, and the first guy, he sets it up, and he tees it up. He hits the ball, and much to his surprise, for the first time in his life, he hits the ball right down the middle of the fairway. I mean, he is so excited. In fact, this guy's such a terrible golfer. He has never seen his ball after he hit it. This is the first time he can literally say, there's my ball, there's my ball. So he's walking down the fairway with his buddy. He's so excited. It's in the middle of the fairway. And much to his surprise, the ball is not only in the middle of the fairway. When he gets there, about 200 yards out, it has rolled up on a 4-inch infield. It's teed up. He grabs his 3-wood, looks at his buddy, and says, this is of God. Swings as hard as he can, misses the whole ball, and kills 5,000 ants. Miracle of miracles, that golf ball that was up here stayed on top of the anthill. Now it's only 2 inches up. It's still teed up. He grabs his 3-wood. He said, I get a second chance. Swings as hard as he can the second time, misses the ball again, and kills 4,998. There are 2 ants left. One ant looks at the other and says, I don't know about you, but if we're going to survive, we had better get on the ball. What I found about leadership is there's consequences. And as you go through this series of training on the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, you don't have to agree with the laws, you don't have to even like the laws, but I'm here to tell you, they'll make you or break you, they'll bless you or curse you. And if you learn how to apply them to your life, it'll be amazing how successful you become. And the last observation I want to make about these leadership laws is that these laws are the foundation of leadership. They're the foundation of leadership. This is what you build your leadership life on. So, I'm ready to go. Let me ask you a question. Are you ready to go? Okay, law number 1, the law of the lid. The law of the lid says leadership determines the level of effectiveness. Now, this is a huge law, and although I say one law is not more important than any other law, here's what I do want you to know. If I would start off with any law, I must start off with this one, and here's why. Because if you can buy into this law in the next 5 to 6 minutes as I talk to you, if you can buy into this law, you'll have a great passion to learn all the others, and let me explain why. I'm going to illustrate the importance of this law by using my hands. Watch this for a moment. It's kind of a visual illustration. Let's say, for example, my left hand here represents my ability to lead people. This is how well John Maxwell leads people. This is my leadership lid. Okay. If this hand is my leadership, and if this hand is my business, in other words, my company, my department that I'm overseeing, okay, whatever I'm in charge of, here's what I want you to understand. My department, my business, my company, my organization, here's what I want you to understand. The lid of my leadership will never allow my business to get any higher. It'll never allow my, in other words, if this truly is my leadership lid, my company, my business, my department, my organization, whatever it is, it can never get any higher than the lid of my leadership. In other words, your leadership, my leadership, our leadership lid, whatever it is going to literally control and determine the size of our business. Now, this is huge. If I were sitting where you are right now and I was taking notes, what I'd be saying to myself is something like this. Since the law of the lid says that my leadership is going to determine my effectiveness, the most important thing that I can do in my life is learn how to become a better leader. Let me explain to you. Remember, I've already said to you the laws can be learned. We've already realized that you can learn these laws, okay? In fact, you told your neighbor you can learn these laws. Now, let me explain to you what could happen. Let's say from a 1 to a 10, my leadership lid is a 4. Well, what that means is if I'm a 4 as a leader, then my business, my organization is going to be a 3. Now here's what's not going to happen. If I'm a 4 as a leader, my business or my organization is not going to keep going above that lid and go to 4, 5, 6, 7. It's never happened. In the history of mankind, the organization has not grown beyond the lid of the leadership of that organization. The leadership contains and controls and determines the size of the business. Now, so if I'm a 4, you look like a great smart audience, so I'm going to ask you a question. If I'm a 4 as a leader, what's my organization going to come to that I lead? But what's my number? 3, 4 max, isn't that right? Can't be any higher. What it's not going to be, it's not going to be a 5, 6, or 7 because my lid is a 4. Now, the good news is I can learn to lead. So here's what I'm saying. If I'm a 4 as a leader and I've got a 3, 3.5, maybe, max, maybe a 4, I doubt, company or organization, here's what I want you to see. If I go from a 4 and I start learning leadership to a 5, to a 6, to a 7, all of a sudden, now look what happens. I have capacity for growth. I have potential for growth. My company can go from a 3 to a 4 to a 5 to a 6. In other words, here's what I'm saying. You can literally double the size of your department. You can double the size of your company by just lifting your leadership lid. And every one of you here, everyone that would watch these tapes, I want to say this to you. You can lift your leadership lid. But everything, remember this, everything rises and falls on leadership. By the way, where I learned this, when I lived in San Diego, California, I had a fellow by the name of Don Stevenson who was my mentor. And he was the president of Global Hospitality, and that Global Hospitality literally would buy, they would buy resorts that were going bankrupt. Resorts like La Costa, Greenleaf, any kind of major resort across America was going under financially. What we found was that this company, Global Hospitality, they would come in and they would buy the company. Okay, now get the picture. Here we are. I'm sitting down with Don Stevenson about every other month. He's mentoring me. And I asked him one day, I said, Don, when you go buy a bankrupt company, a resort that's going under, are there some things that you always do? I'll never forget it. He looked at me and said, John, he said, yes, there is. He said, when we go into a bankrupt company, he said, there are 2 things we always do. And I looked at him and said, 2 things? He said, yes, absolutely. He said, the 2 things we always do is, he said, first of all, we train all the people that are in the service business, the employees. In other words, the guys that are out there when the cars pull up and they're unloading the luggage. So we train them all in relational skills. In other words, we train them, we talk to them about how to remember names, how to get along with people. And he said, the reason we do that, the waiters, the waitresses, the people behind the checkout counter, on the grounds, and he said what we found is 90% of the people who do not return to the resort after the first visit had a bad experience with the employees of the organization. They weren't treated with great respect, or they were taken care of well. And so he said, what we do is we go through and we train all the people. Now what I do, I'm sitting there and I'm taking notes, and so I'm writing down to me, make sure that you've trained all the people in the organization. Okay. He said the second thing we do is, he said, every time we take over a bankrupt company, he said, we fire the president. And I don't like that one there. And I look at him and say, what do you mean you fire the president? He said, John, he said, every time we take over companies going under, he said, we fire the president. I said, well, it seems a little harsh, isn't it? I mean, don't you first go see him, you know what I mean? Go sit in the office, light a fire in the fireplace, hold hands, do a little kumbaya, you know what I'm talking about? No. He said, John, he said, we fired the president. And I'm pressing him a little bit more. And I couldn't remember because he was eating the salad. He was just looking down, eating the salad, talking to him. And he stops, puts his fork down. Now he's looking at him. It's a little bit ticked that I'm not catching it, you know. And he's looking at it and said, John, listen. He said, if the president were any good, the company wouldn't be doing that.
Wow.
First thing we do is fire the president. I remember Father saying, fire the president. You know what he was teaching me that day? He was teaching me the law of the living. What he was really saying to me is that it's an absolute fact that in any organization, everything rises and falls on leadership. And the leadership of that organization will determine the size of that organization. And so therefore, when you have a good company that's thriving and doing great business and excelling, you've got good leadership. And when you've got a company that's stagnant and just going downhill, it's not going well, I can promise you, you have bad leadership. Everything rises and falls on leadership. Now, let me tell you what that law did for me as a leader. That day, when I walked out from the table, after listening to Don talk to me, that day, what I realized was that I was responsible as a leader. That I had to now take responsibility for my organization. I had to take responsibility for my people. I had to take responsibility for the success of my company. That I couldn't go and blame someone else. I read a statement recently that's just powerful. Here's what it is. It's easier to go from failure to success than it is to go from excuses to success. That's a tremendous statement. And whenever as a leader, I begin to make excuses for why my company is not doing well or why my organization is not doing well, and I begin to go say, well, you know, I mean, we're in the wrong location and we got the wrong people. And listen, company excuses happen. If you're the leader, learn to lead and take responsibility for that leadership. Here's the good news. You can grow as a leader. You can become a better leader than you are right now. That I promise you. But take responsibility. Because the law of the lid says the organization or the company cannot rise any higher than your level of leadership. The law of the lid is a huge law. So if you'll notice in your workbook, I have some questions. Just some simple questions. Questions that I want you on your own to ask yourself. Questions such as, what is the lid number on my leadership? From a 1 to 10, where am I? Question number 2. I love this one. Would those around me agree with my assessment? Get your leadership team together. And by the way, let me just say this. If you know, when you're kind of evaluating yourself, you put down, you're probably from 1 to 10, probably like a 9.5. And you ask your team, you get your team together and say, you know, what do you think my number is? And they say you're a 2.5. You're probably missing something. So let those around you evaluate and assess your leadership. And then question number 3, what is my plan to increase my lid number, my leadership lid number? How am I going to grow it? Because I have found that this is absolutely key. The ability to prepare and do curriculum like we're doing here so that you can grow as a leader. I mean, how am I going to grow my leadership lid? And question number 4, what are the lid numbers of those that work with me? That's a great question. Those that are around you close, because one of the laws we'll study in the 21 Areas of Laws of Leadership is the law of the inner circle. The law of the inner circle says those closest to me determine the level of my success. So what are the lid numbers of those around me? And then question number 5, what is my plan to increase their lid number? What's my plan? How am I going to increase the lid numbers of those around? Law number 1, the law of the lid.
Okay, so I want to talk about it for a minute. I'll just share a few thoughts. Then if you'd like to share something that impacted you or a question you might have. In my opinion, and this one, I'm going to spend a little more time on this one than some of them. In my opinion, this is one of the most important laws. I think it's important that he started with the law of the lid. And here's one thing I want you to understand about John Maxwell. I agree with 98% or 99% of what he teaches. There's one thing I do not agree with. He says, now he's changed a little bit through the years, but he used to say, nobody's born a leader. I disagree with that statement. Now, I know why he says it. He says it because he doesn't want anybody to think, well, if I wasn't born a leader, I can't become one. Yeah. Everybody can grow. But you can't tell me there are not born leaders. If you were to take 20 little 2-year-olds and put them in a room with a window where they couldn't see you, but you could see them, I guarantee you within 2 minutes, 1 or 2 of them would have the others following them everywhere they're going.
Yeah.
Why? They got leadership skills.
Yeah.
They were born with them. So there are people that are born leaders. Now but even they have to learn. But I know why he says what he says is he doesn't want somebody to think, well, because I wasn't born a leader, I can't be one. Yeah. Everybody can learn to lead. And the only way you can learn to lead is, as he says, not make excuses. Mm-hmm. Be realistic. If you're weak somewhere, admit you're weak. And then find somebody who has strengths in those areas and swallow your pride and say, I'm weak here, teach me how to grow. Now that's a sign of strength. That in itself is a sign of strength. Mm-hmm. The law of the lid. The people you're leading will never go beyond where you are. Let me give you an example of how I know this to be true. As a pastor, and I pastored many years, there were certain people that I would pull up on YouTube and I would listen to them when I was trying to be fed. And they would feed me and they would feed me and they would feed me and I would grow and I would learn and I'd take notes. And then sometimes maybe a year later or whatever, I'd be listening to them and I'd think, this isn't ministering to me. It's not doing me any good. At first I thought, I wonder if there's something wrong in their life. And then all of a sudden I realized it's not them, it's me. What happened? I caught up with them. And that doesn't mean they're bad. No. It doesn't mean that they no longer have a place. There are still, if there are 5, there are still 2s, 3s, and 4s all over the place that they can help grow. But I had grown to the point to where no longer were they ministering to me. It didn't mean that what they were saying was bad. It just, I was already there. So what I had to do is start listening to people who were on a higher level so that I could grow some more. Point being, your people are the same way. The people under you are the same way. Leadership determines effectiveness. Your organization, your church, cannot rise above your leadership. It will not rise above your leadership. And our leadership ability is the lid of how far and how much your church can grow or your department. So if you want your department to grow, you have to make sure that you're growing. Hence, we should be lifelong learners. We should be lifelong readers. We should never quit learning. We should learn to ask questions. We should get out of our comfort zone and not think like we have to make everybody think we've got it together. It's better to go to somebody and say, I'm lacking here. Can you train me? Can you teach me? You've got something that I need. Because everything rises and falls on leadership. Therefore, I have to take responsibility for where my church or where my department is. I have to take responsibility. Okay? And I can't make excuses. So we have to learn where our weaknesses are and work on them. Now, a little later, I'm going to share something. I don't think he shares it in this series, so I'm going to share it now. And if I got ahead of him, forgive me. I don't think he shares it here. But have you ever heard the statement, what should we work on? Should we spend a lot of time working on our strengths, or should we should we spend a lot of time working on our weaknesses, or should we work on our strengths? And there's one group that says, well, you've already got your strengths, so work on your weaknesses. Work on those weaknesses. And another group says, no, you're weak there. You're never going to get to be a 6 or a 7. So put your energy in your strengths and become greater in your strengths. I'll never forget hearing John Maxwell say in another teaching this. He said it depends upon, how did he say it? It depends upon whether your strengths and weaknesses are your gifts or not. In other words, he said, if your strengths, I'll have to get that. It was an excellent point. In other words, if you're not gifted in certain areas, it doesn't matter how hard you work on them, you'll never get beyond a 2. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Let's say you're a 1, but you're not gifted there. You can work on that till you're blue in the face, and you might become a 2 or a 3. But if it is a gift you have, let's say you know you're gifted in preaching, as an example, and you're really at a 2, then you focus on that and you can become a 7 or an 8. It makes sense, doesn't it? And that doesn't mean we don't focus on, we never focus on our weaknesses. It just, we need to determine if that's who we are or not, as to where we put our focus. And if we're a pastor and we're not strong in counseling, let's say, we bring people on staff who are strong in counseling. We learn from them while they do the work. Just saying. So, comments, questions? Yes.
Like you were saying about how you hit the lid of the leaders that were once growing you, you had to find a new leader. How do you find the new leader? Like, how do you determine they're at a higher lid level than the previous
Good
person?
question. How do you find somebody that's at a higher lid level? You determine, when I'm listening to them, am I fed? Are they speaking in areas that I need to learn something? And so that tells me that their lid level, at least in that area, is higher than mine. Okay. That being said, Lexi, let me say it this way. Be careful, and by the way, those of you that are on Zoom, I like interaction. So if you want to enter in here, you unmute yourself and you enter in. Okay. Don't limit yourself to only listening to one person.
Mm-hmm.
Some people say, well, I'm only going to listen to my pastor. Well, you're not only going to get all his strengths then, you're going to get all his weaknesses.
Yeah.
So we need to widen our horizon and listen to more people and gain from more people so that we can offset the weaknesses of those that we do admire that have glaring weaknesses. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And the problem with too many people is they think, well, I just want to stick with this. Get out of your comfort zone. Start listening to some people that maybe have some beliefs you're not positive about yet. And I'm not talking about heresy. But I am talking about ways of looking at ministry. Okay? Ways of interpreting Scripture. Because we tend to, our comfort zone is, we tend to stick to those that
Agree with that.
well, or we agree with. Hey, listen to people you don't always agree with. They're going to teach you something. They're going to teach you something. Any other questions, comments? The law of the lid.
You said how we should be lifelong learners, and I was noticing in his in that video when he was talking about that, the guy, his friend, who they come in and they do 2 things. You know, they retrain people and they fire the president. It dawned on me he's learning right then, like John Maxwell.
Yes. At first he thought I must have heard wrong.
Yeah.
But then he began to realize what the guy was saying was true. The place wouldn't be in the situation it is, and if it wasn't for the president.
Right.
You see. Now, I would say, I'm going to backtrack here, and I could be wrong. I'm not going to try to put things in the guy's mouth. But maybe if the president would have gone to that other company himself and said, I'm doing some things wrong here. I'd like you to get involved. I'd like, maybe they would have said, well, this guy's got some potential.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but usually, they're not that way. you know, and they feel threatened by the other people coming in.
Yeah.
He said, we always fire the president and start over. Anyone else? Any other thoughts before we move to the next law? Good stuff, right?
Yeah. Leaders are readers.
Okay, let's go to the next one.
Huh?
The listeners.
The second law is the law of influence. And the law of influence says the true measure of leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. I love this law, and when I teach it, I find sometimes it throws an emotional curve to people. Let me explain to you what I mean. You see, the law of influence says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. I find most people want to attach other definitions to leadership. They want to say things like, John, I think leadership is title. And by the way, I have a leadership title. Or I think leadership is position. And by the way, I have a leadership position. I find that a lot of people want to tie all kinds of definitions into leadership. But let me just tell you, leadership's influence. Nothing more, nothing less. Let me explain it this way. The person with the most influence at any given time, for any given reason, in any given group, is the leader of the pack. Now, what that means is there are times when influence changes. There's times when one person will have more influence than another, but when you get onto another issue or another subject, that another person that leadership may shift a little bit because we are not all strong in all areas. And so therefore, when I'm talking about leadership as influence, what it shows is there's a fluidness of leadership, and that leadership doesn't always stay with one person. In fact, let me give you a perfect example of this. As we study together the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, one of the first things you're going to realize is this. You do not do well in all 21 laws. Okay? For those that are in the studio today, I just want you to know, you won't do well on all 21 laws. Now, here's what's going to happen. As you evaluate yourself on each law, here's what's going to happen. You're going to have a tendency to think that when you do well on a law, you're going to say to yourself, now that is a true law. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, John's right on there. Oh, that is so good. He's just, that is true. And on the laws that you don't do so well, you're going to say, that may not be a law. Now what you're going to find is you're going to do well on some laws, you're going to not do well on some laws. Hey, that's the way it is. In fact, there are going to be some laws, I'll point them out to you, that I don't do well on. Here's what I want you to see. That's why it's important for you not only to understand leadership, but that's why it's important for you to have a leadership team. That's why it's important for you to train leaders around you. Here's why. In fact, I have seen over the last 3 decades, in the 80s, I saw that the great word was management. Everybody talked about management. Peter Drucker did some great things on management. When we got to the 90s, in corporate America, it changed from management to leadership. Now, there's a reason for that. See, managers assume things will always stay the same. Leaders assume things will always change. So in the 80s, when things were stable, wow, we needed managers to kind of control and to make sure everything was being taken care of. In the 90s, when we got to leadership, all of a sudden it drastically changed. And we needed guys and gals and men and women that were fast-paced and could change and embrace change. And I can tell you, as now we've entered into a whole new century, I can promise you we've gone from management in the 80s to leadership in the 90s to now I can tell you we're going, as we've entered in a whole new, not only decade, but a whole new century, we're going now to team leadership. And the reason we're going to team leadership is because the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership will teach you and me very simply that you just don't do all 21 things well. You don't, I don't. Now, the moment we understand that, I've got to have a leadership team. And the reason I have to have a leadership team is because I need people around me that can absolutely make up for my weaknesses and can complement me. Does that make sense? So, for example, as we're teaching through here, here's what I want you to see. So I walk down here and just kind of use maybe my front row for an example, because this will work. Let's say, for example, this is my leadership team. My name's John. What's your name? Okay, Chuck, perfect. Let's say we're in one of the laws, and let's say Chuck does a better job at one of the laws than I do. One of the reasons we need to know, evaluate ourselves, and one of the reasons we need to have a leadership team around us is because we all need to know that if I get to the law of navigation, by the way, that's a law I'll teach later on. That's a law I'm weak in. I'm not a good navigator. What I have to realize is, but let's say Chuck is I'm a 2 as a navigator, okay? Well, just trust me. You don't want me to navigate. Okay, I'm kind of like Mr. Magoo. Okay, so you don't want that. You don't want Mr. Magoo running the ship down. But Chuck, let's say he's a 9. What that means is when we get to something in our organization that requires navigating, what we do is I take, and now Chuck has more influence. Because if you know Chuck's a better navigator than me, who are you going to follow? See, for too long, we've said, follow me because I have the position. How ridiculous. Follow me because I have the title. I'm the president. I'm the one that's over everybody. Follow me. That's not a good reason to follow somebody. You got to follow a person because they're competent. You got to follow a person because they're best. And the secure leaders, and I'll talk about the law of empowerment. That's another law. But the secure leaders look around and say, look, gang, let me tell you something. Chuck's a better navigator than me. So when it comes to navigating the day-to-day process, and we've got to navigate maybe for a 3-6 month period and some issue in the organization, Chuck's going to have the ball, and I'm going to follow Chuck. Because all great leaders are not only leaders, they're great followers. Because they appreciate the value that true leadership brings. Does that make sense? So leadership is influence. I may have influence in some areas. Chuck will have influence in other areas. What's your name? Bridget will have influence. In other words, the person that is the best leader should have the most influence in that given area. Make sense? So look around you and ask yourself, who is influential and in what areas are they influential? That's why, several years ago, I designed a way for people to understand influence as it pertains to leadership that would make sense to them. And in your notes, if you'll take just a moment for me, I want to draw your attention to the 5 levels of leadership. And when I use the word leadership, I could use the word influence, that I use them interchangeably. And what I want to do is I want to walk you through this because this is essential for you to understand where you are as far as what level of influence you have and where you should go to increase your influence level. For example, let's go down to the very bottom step, okay? On that first lowest level, put the word position. Now, that's the lowest level of influence. That's the lowest level of leadership. In other words, when you and I go to an organization, we get a title, we get a position. Now, right inside that step is another blank. I encourage you to put the word rights because that's the key word when you're on the position level of leadership. Let me explain. When you and I have a title, when you and I have a position, we get certain rights that come with the position. Is that true? They'll look at you and say, you're going to be over these 6 people. This is going to be your department. These are your people you're responsible for. Okay. In other words, at level number 1, people follow you because they have to. Right. In other words, people say, why are you following that person? Well, it's because they're the boss. They're the leader. I have to. In other words, I'm under them. I really don't have any choice. Now, let me share something with you. Every one of us in the studio, every one of you that watch me do the leadership training, anybody that's just observing what I'm saying right now and understanding themselves as leadership, every one of us have had to follow people that weren't good leaders. Isn't that true? How many of you we don't need to call out names, okay, let's not get personal here. How many of you have at one time in your business life or your work life had to follow somebody and they were just a lousy leader? I mean, that's absolute go. That's 100% in the studio. Let me ask you this question. How many of you are sitting beside that person right now? No, don't go there. Don't go there. The first question is a leadership question. The second question is an IQ question, okay? Yeah. Don't go there. Don't raise your hand on the second one. That would not be a good thing. Okay, now, here's what I'm saying. Every one of us have had to follow people that were not good leaders. Why? Because they had the position and title. This year, I'm going to be speaking to the West Point. I'm coming in for 2.5 days. I'm going to be speaking to all the cadets. I'm going to be speaking to the leadership. And they want me to talk about the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership because they teach it there. What's interesting is my challenge as I go to West Point will be I'm going to teach the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. And so much of the service area is based on that.
That's right.
And what they're going to have to understand, and what I'm going to do my best to teach them, of course, they're very, very sharp, so they're going to understand it very quickly, probably much better than I would. Is they're going to have to understand that just because people follow you because you have a position doesn't mean that you're a great leader. Does that make sense? Level number 2 is the permission level. Let me walk you through the rest of these very quickly. And the key word on the inside of level number 2 is relationships. And level number 2, people follow you because they want to. By the way, just stop for a moment and look at your notes. There's a world of difference between 1 and 2. In step number 1, people follow you because they have to. In step number 2, people follow you because they want to, because now you develop relationships with them. Level number 3 is the production level. And the key word is results. Basically, what I'm saying at level number 3 is this. At level number 3, people follow you because of what you've done for the organization. In other words, it's growing. The profit's better. The morale is higher. Okay, now all of a sudden people are following you because you've been successful in the organization. That's level 3. Level number 4 is the people development level. That's always my goal. When we talk about a couple of the laws of leadership, I'll talk more about people development. But in people development, the key word is reproduction. Oh, yes. People follow you there because of what you have done for them. What you have done for them as individuals. In other words, on level number 3, they follow you because of results and what you've done for the company. At level number 4, they follow you because of what you've done for them. Now they're personally growing. Now they can say, I'm a better person. I'm more effective in my job because you've equipped them and given them tools in the last level. It's what I call the personhood level. And the key word there is respect. And basically, you have done it so well with so many people for so long that people just automatically put you up there. So it's a wonderful level to be on. And I would encourage you on law number 2, just to take some time and look at the questions and ask yourself questions about influence and how you can more effectively influence others. The 5 levels of leadership, which is a lecture in itself, has its own training video because I spend a great deal of time really helping people work through those 5 laws. But for right now, the law of influence says there are 5 levels of influence, and you need to know where you are because leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less.
Okay, so the law of influence. Questions, comments?
I
Thoughts?
need to give it to him. He said I'm low.
Production.
Number 3 was production.
Results.
And the key word was results.
So
What you've done.
I'm constantly telling the youth all the time, when you're hanging out with people, I tell them, look, you're either an influence or you're being influenced. I said, you may not realize it. I said, but if you're not the higher influence, then people are going to have an influence on you. So we really got to, just to be careful about where we go or how we put ourselves out.
Very true.
I really like what you said about managers assume everything will always stay the same and leaders assume they change. Because a lot of times it's easy to get the manager mindset where you're just like, okay, well, this is working. We're just going to keep doing it. But a leader will look at a situation and say, okay, this is working, but how can we make it work better? And that's something I struggle with is I just want to change everything all the time. And so I don't even allow time for things to work.
Mhm.
And so that was good what you said.
Okay, let's talk about that for a minute.
Oh, no.
No, let's talk about that for a minute. There's a difference between managers and leaders. Is one better than the other?
No.
We need both.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We need both. And the problem with most people is they're either a manager and they can't lead, or they're a leader and they can't manage.
Mm.
In fact, another Maxwell quote goes something like this. The biggest job is not making the decision. The biggest job is managing the decision,
Yeah.
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Case in point, in the transitioning there at One Church Turlock. Granted, it was a big job to make the decision of the new pastor, but then the bigger job has been in managing it from all sides. Why? Because people are used to a certain way or certain people or certain things.
Yeah.
And you have to learn how to manage the situation. So what we really need to be are managing leaders.
Yeah.
That's good.
never heard that term before, but I just sort of coined that right now. Managing leaders and or leading managers. So you could say it whichever way you want to say it. But we need to learn how to balance the two. And if we're strong in one and weak in the other, have someone come alongside that's stronger in the one we're weak in and weaker in the one we're strong in, and we complement one another and work together. See? Anyone else? Any other thoughts? The law of influence. The true nature of leadership is influence. And the way he says it, nothing more, nothing less. The person with the most influence is the leader.
Yeah.
Let me talk to you in church terms. If you're the pastor and you have to tell the people you are, you're not.
Yeah.
You just got the title.
Yeah.
Right? One of the classes I teach for another school all the time is fivefold ministry. Apostle, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. And one of the things I talk about is, while I do not think it is absolutely wrong to call people apostle so-and-so or prophet so-and-so, evangelist, I don't think it's wrong. But you can have the title without having the anointing.
Yeah.
And it's better to function than it is to have the title. There's nothing wrong with the title as long as you're functioning. But it's better to function even if you never have the title. And what will you be doing? Influencing people. Influencing people.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, do we need a 5-minute break?
Yeah.
Let's take 5 minutes, guys. 5-minute break. Okay, we're going to get started here again.
Did you run downstairs?
No.
That was faster than downstairs.
So going to get started here, and well, let's just go to the next one. Those of you that are on Zoom, feel free to chime in when you have questions or comments. Like to get your input. I know it's a little harder when you're on Zoom, but it's still viable. And
Yeah, the three of us can talk all night.
so let's go to number 3 and get
The
started.
third law is the law of process. And the law of process says leadership develops daily, not in a day. This is an incredible law.
Before we go into this, let me remind you that even though you're watching all these laws, you're going to want to read the book because there's much more in the book than there is in what he's saying. So I don't want you to think that this is a either or. You know, it's you need to be watching it or reading it.
To teach it, and the reason I love to teach it is because if a person can understand process, they're going to be very effective as a leader. But if they don't understand the process of becoming a leader, they're going to get very frustrated. Let me explain to you. Many times when I do leadership conferences, we have a Q&A period of time. Probably the most common question asked me when I do leadership conference, somebody raise their hand and say, John, here's the question. Are leaders born? And whenever they ask me the question, are leaders born? I always look at them and I always say, of course they are. Think about that question. I've never met an unborn leader. Don't particularly want to either, thank you very much. Now what they're really asking, this is not asking are leaders born. What they're really asking is, are there leaders that, are people when they're born, they kind of got it. You know what I'm saying? They got it, and are there people when they're born, they don't got it. And I suppose if you got it, you lead. If you don't got it, you get in line. You know what I mean? Hope there's a water fountain at the end somewhere, okay? That's a very important question. Because what I have found is this, and this is so huge. What I have found is there are a lot of people who just think you either have it or you don't have it. And I can tell you right now, that is not true. There are people that have leadership leanings. Of course there are. Just like there are people when they're born, they have kind of musical leanings. So there are leanings toward leadership that some people have that other people have. But anyone can learn to be a leader. In fact, that's why I have such a passion to teach leadership. That's why I have such a passion to teach these laws. Because if you learn these laws, it becomes absolutely amazing how well you're going to be able to learn to lead. So let me take a moment and explain to you a couple of important thoughts in this law. In your notes, we overestimate the event and we underestimate the process. I have found this to be very common with people in leadership. They overestimate what an event will do for them. They come to a leadership conference or they read a leadership book. They say, oh my goodness, this is so good. And this is going to make me a leader. This is going to change me. Now, let me just explain to you the difference between the event and the process, because this will help you understand the law of process. For example, when you go to a leadership event, I'm talking about like going to a leadership conference, reading a leadership book, okay, listening to a leadership lecture. Okay. When you go to a leadership event, that encourages decisions. That's what it does. In other words, you go and say, oh my goodness, I know it's important for me to lead, so I'm going to make a decision. For example, when I taught you the law of the lid, it said that everything's going to rise and fall on your leadership. Many of you made a choice, probably. You said, oh my goodness, then if that's the truth, then my lid of leadership is going to determine how effective I am in my business, I'm going to have to learn to lead. That's a decision. Events encourage decisions. The process encourages development. The emphasis in process is continuing to grow and develop yourself. The event motivates people. We all love to come and be motivated and encouraged. But the process matures people. And we're wanting to mature you as a leader. to motivate you? Yes, but maturity is much more important. The event is a calendar issue. You say, okay, on this certain date, I'm going to go to an event and learn some leadership, whereas the process is a culture issue. It's being in an environment or a culture that encourages you every day to learn, every day to grow, every day to develop yourself as a leader. The event challenges people. I find that I'm challenged when I go to leadership events, but the process changes people. Why? Because you can't change overnight. You can make a sudden decision, but you can't make a sudden change. That's a process. And there's a lot of difference between that. You see, here's what I think. I think the event is easy, and I think the process is difficult. And I want to encourage you, as you're watching these training tapes, to understand that it's a process. And it's not one day, one time, one book, one lecture that's going to change your life. But it's going through the process of doing that. And the reason that leadership must be a process is because leadership is many faceted. In fact, think about it for a moment. There are 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. Just the very fact there are 21 laws of leadership tells you you just can't absorb it, or you can't learn it, or you can't apply it instantly. I was in a leadership lecture in, a couple years ago, at a conference. And I'll never forget, during the break, I was signing books, and this kid came up to me, and I was just out of college, and kind of probably a business major, and he was all excited about leadership, what he was learning. And I could see his passion. I love kids because they just have passion. So he came up to me, and he kind of gets in my face a little bit, and he said, okay, John, he said, I love this leadership. I've been listening to you all day. So I got a question. So what's your question? He said, what's the one thing I need to know about leadership? So I sucked it up to get energy. Here we go. I got to match this kid's intensity. So I looked at him, and I kind of got in his face. And I said, the one thing you need to know to be a great leader is that there is more than one thing you need to know to be a great leader. In fact, I said there are 21 things that you need to know to be a great leader. Now, you see, here's the kid. What's he doing? He's trying to take leadership and condense it. He's basically wanting me to fast food leadership. He's wanting to come to the window of leadership and get a sack of leadership. You know what I'm saying? And take off down there with this sack of leadership and kind of eat it on the way and come out of the car as a great leader. Can't happen. Why? Because leadership is many faceted. Let me explain. Look at your notes for a moment. We've already understood that, first of all, leadership is influence. So it certainly is the ability to influence people, but it's more than influence. You show me, I can show you people that have influence, but they're not great leaders. Isn't that true? Well, it's also, secondly, navigation. The ability to take people from point A to point B to point C. So there's a navigating principle of leadership, and yet I could show you people that are tour guides that aren't good leaders. Or thirdly, it's empowerment. It's the ability to take people and empower them. Of course it is. To be able to put belief in people and let them go to a higher level of it. But it's more than empowering. Number 4, it's relationships. It's getting along with people. I know people who get along with me very well, but they can't lead anything. Number 5, it's timing. There's a huge amount of timing that's involved in leadership, and the ability to understand timing. It's huge. In fact, there's a whole law on it. That's more than timing. Number 6, it's momentum. If you do timing right, you get the big mo going for you. And it's the ability to sense and feel the surge of momentum in an organization. But it's more than momentum. It's more than just getting the big mo going for you. Number 7 is sacrifice. It's the ability to give up so you can go up. Of course it is. And yet I know people that they sacrifice and they're still not great leaders. You see, you're beginning to catch this. Number 8 is it's attitude. It's the way you think. And yet I know people have great attitudes that are great leaders. Now, let me just stop down. Here's what I think is very obvious to all of us right now. It's very obvious to all of us. That is, it's many faceted. In other words, it's the ability to understand a lot of things that make you a well-rounded leader. It's kind of like in the NFL and pro quarterbacks. It's kind of like a rookie quarterback coming into that major league. It's impossible for them the first year to be probably a great quarterback. quarterback. There's just too much. I was up speaking the other day with Cleveland Browns and Butch Davis and the crew, and they were talking to me, and I literally had a guy give me a 30-minute teaching on the quarterback and all they have to learn in their first year. I was amazed at that whole thing. It's read the defenses and understand the offense and be able to sense the shifts and be able to change the play in a moment. It's a lot of stuff. Now, here's what I want you to know. I think that the problem is too many times we try to microwave leaders. We put them in a microwave and get them in our company and say, oh my goodness, I got to develop some leaders. I got this Maxwell stuff. He said, develop leaders. So come here. I want you to be a leader. I think you can be a leader. Here, get in the microwave. You push it by, push a few buttons and zap it. By the way, because we microwave so many leaders, that's why we have so many Pop-Tart leaders. Right? You got a lot of Pop-Tart people in your company. It's because you've been microwaving. We need to quit microwaving leaders, and we need to start crock-potting. That's huge. One more thought about this tremendous law process. That is, the secret of our success is discovered in our daily agenda. What we do every day is the secret to our success. Not what we do at one moment or not what we're going to do sometime. A couple of years ago, I wrote a book called Your Roadmap for Success. And I'll never forget when I wrote the book, my publisher wanted to call it Your Roadmap to Success. I said, no, you can't call it the Roadmap to Success because there's no such places. Success is not a destination. It's a journey. It's a process. So many times we confuse true success with what I call recognition of success. It's like my friend one time said to me, he said, John, all my life I've worked hard at being an overnight success. Bingo. That's so key. It's a process. The law of process says leaders develop daily, not in a day.
Okay. So thoughts, questions from anybody?
I like what he at the end of the day, he said, don't try to microwave, cock potting.
We want everything right now.
Right.
We want everything quick. How about this statement? The secret to our success is in our daily life.
Yeah.
What you have to understand is that God can show up in the mundane of life. We're always looking for the spectacular.
Yeah.
And we're expecting that overnight success, that once in a lifetime opportunity, that whatever it is to make us a success, when in reality, it's the daily grind. It's being faithful to what you know to do day to day, day in and day out. Do it right because it's right.
Yeah.
You see. And it's a process. It's a process. Like he says, it's not a destination. It's a process.
Yeah.
And the problem with too many people is they miss the process. I think we talked about this in the book of Romans, didn't we? We dealt with that the concept of trials produce character and right, and it's the process.
But it's like you said, the slow cooker. I liked how he said that because it made so much sense to me about. I think of a piece of meat. I think probably because I'm hungry, but it made sense to me. Like you put something in a slow cooker and it tastes. I mean, it's 10 times better than the microwave or the stove top,
And it takes 10 times as long.
the process, like time and experience.
He said this. I used this same concept in the sermon one time when I was talking about we want microwave answers, and God is in the crock pot system.
Yeah.
You see, and it's in the process.
Like Abraham.
And
45 years.
and the problem is too many people are trying to shortcut the process.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And when you try to shortcut the process, you're going to also shortcut the answer and shortcut the what God is intending in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times when people try to shortcut the process, they spend all their time and attention on trying to find the shortcut, but they miss
They could have just done. It's just like the kid. It's just like the kid who'll spend an hour and a half trying to figure out how to get out of cleaning their room when they could have had it done in 15 minutes.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. I like what he said, we overestimate the event and underestimate the process, which is a lot of times, I know, especially as Christians, we expect a camp or a conference to change the trajectory of our life, but really that's just the igniting of the fire, and we forget, like you said, the mundane, fueling that, and the daily practice of being.
That's the difference between an event-driven church and a process-driven church.
Yeah. We have event after event.
Event after event after event, trying to hope something happens.
Yeah.
When in reality, if we realize in the process things are happening,
Yeah.
they just don't happen overnight.
Mhm.
They don't happen in a day. Okay. So, any thoughts from any of our online people?
Is that Trina from Refuge?
Yes.
I have a feeling I don't see a lot of Trina.
Yeah, that's me. Can you hear me?
Hi Trina.
Hey, John.
Well, you got her to talk. I couldn't get her to talk.
Well, I just been, it's been a while, and so I've just been soaking this in and trying to read my shorthand. Kind of scary.
Good stuff, isn't it, Trina?
It's really good. And I guess I realized that I've actually been in the slow cooker instead of being a Pop-Tart. I was trying to be a Pop-Tart, but it's been good.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
Very true. Okay, I think we've got time for one more. Let's go ahead with one more. Law number 4.
Law number 4 is the law of navigation. And the law of navigation says anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. I've often described leadership in kind of 2 terms. There's what I call the art form of leadership, and then there's a technical form of leadership. The law of navigation is a technical form of leadership. It's very tangible. It's point A to point B to point C. For example, the law of timing or the law of intuition, that's art form of leadership. It's much more subjective. It's much harder to get your hands around it. Jack Welch was exactly right when he said, a good leader remains focused. Controlling your destination is better than being controlled by it. So let's study for a few minutes the law of navigation. I brought with me something that I read the other day that I just love. And I want to pass it on to you. So just kind of sit and relax for a moment. Let me just read you this I think, humorous story. A man in a hot air balloon realized that he was lost. He reduced altitude and spotted a woman below. He descended a bit more and he shouted, "Excuse me, can you help me? Promised a friend that I would meet him an hour ago, but I don't know where I am." The woman below replied, "You're in a hot air balloon, hovering approximately 30 feet above the ground. You're between 40 and 41 degrees north latitude and between 59 and 60 degrees west longitude." "You must be an engineer," said the balloon. "I am," replied the woman. "How did you know?" "Well," answered the balloonist, "everything you told me is technically correct, but I have no idea what to make of your information. And the fact is, I'm still lost. Frankly, you've not been much help at all. If anything, you've delayed my trip." The woman below responded, "You must be in management." You can see the train coming, can't you? Said, "You must be in management." "I am," replied the balloonist. "But how did you know?" "Well," said the woman, "you don't know where you are or where you're going. You have risen to where you are due to a large quantity of hot air. You made a promise which you have no idea how to keep, and you expect people beneath you to solve your problems. And the fact is, you are in exactly the same position you were in before we met, but now somehow it's my fault." Isn't that great, huh? When I think of the law of navigation, trying to get from one point to another, there's one thing, of course, that we have to understand, and that is, if anybody's going to be a good leader and navigate, you have to know where you are. And again, I referred to an earlier law, the Mr. Magoo thing. I mean, let me tell you something. When you get on the ship, You don't want to look up and see that the captain is Mr. McGee. It just kind of is a little bit unsettling. And the reason for that is, in your notes, there are 3 statements I want to make. And the 3 statements are these. A leader is one who sees more than others see. That's a fact. That's part of leadership. What do leaders do? They see the big picture. Is that not true? But the second statement, a leader is one who sees farther than others see. In other words, a leader is a person who looks out and he can see distant horizon and has great vision. But the third thought I want you to know is that a leader is one who sees before others see. It's also a timing issue. And one of the qualities of a leader is you put them in a room, they sense things. They sense things quicker than others sense them. It's not an IQ. It's just not that they're smarter. It's just the fact that they have leadership within them, and they sense a need before others sense a need. They sense an opportunity before others sense an opportunity. So what do leaders do? Especially if you're a good navigating leader, you see more than others see, you see farther than others see, and you see before others see. That's what good leaders do. Bill Easton said one time, realistic leaders are objective enough to minimize illusions. They understand that self-deception can cost them their vision. Or Max Dupree, my friend, said this. He said the number one responsibility of a leader is to define reality. What I have found about great navigational leaders is they're highly realistic. Because they realize they have the responsibility of taking other people on a trip where they have never gone before, and they understand that they have to have experience and success. In fact, there's a world of difference. Think about it for a moment. There's a world of difference between a travel agent and a tour guide. You know, a travel agent, they get your tickets for you, and they get brochures for you, and they send you on a trip. You know what? They send you and me on trips every day of places they've never been before. You know what I'm saying? They bon voyage, have a good trip, here are your tickets, and hope everything turns out right. Well, what travel agents, they send you where they've never been before. But a tour guide, when you go to the place you arrive at this place, you have a tour guide. You know what a tour guide? Tour guide basically says, I'm going to take you where I've been many times before. And I'm going to tell you about what I know. See, the great navigating leaders are leaders who they've been there and they've done. But they're not in a been there, done that. You know, after run people who kind of go around, been there, done that, been there, done, and they're bored. You know what I'm saying? You kind of say, well, you've been there too many times. You've done that too many times. Are you with me? So we've seen the been there. No. The great navigational leaders, they're been there, done that, but their excitement is taking people with them on the journey. I was just last week with Jim Winiker, who was the first American to go climb Mount Everest. And when we were sitting down around the table and having a wonderful lunch together, and I was asking Jim about some of his experiences, I'm just listening because he just has incredible experience. And I said, what are you most proud of? I mean, you've been to Mount Everest on more than one occasion, the top. I said, what are you most proud of? And he said, John, what I'm most proud of is, he said, I have taken more people to the top of Mount Everest than any other person. And I thought, there is a true navigator. There's a person who understands that my joy isn't getting to the top. Been there, done that. My joy is getting other people to go to the top with me. And think about it for a moment. That's what navigators do. How many of you have ever heard the expression, it's lonely at the top? You've heard that, haven't you? Now, every time we hear the expression, it's lonely at the top, we think that a leader said that. A leader didn't say that. Think about it for a minute. If you're lonely, if you're all by yourself at the top, you're not leading anybody. If you're at the top all alone, here's the thought. Get off the top. And go down to where the people are. Go down and find your team and take your team to the top with you. That's what leaders do. Doesn't that make sense? To help me, because I am weak in this law. I'm not an A to point B to point C. It's not a strength of mine. I'm more visionary. I developed something in the 70s. I'm talking about 25 years ago, as a young leader, knowing I had a lot of leadership responsibilities and realizing I was leading people that were older than me, more experienced than me, because I was just young. I developed a wonderful process that's helped me to navigate that I want to give to you. And in your notes, I want to walk you through this wonderful, wonderful step-by-step process of how to plan ahead. Are you ready? The letter P. The letter P stands for predetermine your course of action. In other words, as a leader, what do? The first thing I do is I determine where do I want to go. I don't wait till the crowd's saying let's go somewhere and then say where do I want to go. What's a leader do? Leaders predetermine. They think before others think. They see before others see. They've got that leadership edge. So predetermine your course of action. The letter L, lay out your goals. Basically, goals are nothing more than stepping stones. They're a process. So when I say lay out your goals, what I'm talking about basically is this. Use each one of your goals as stepping stones. So if I use this little platform for a moment, my goal is to get back up to the bar stool, basically I said, okay, here's goal 1 and here's goal 2. In other words, lay out your goals, develop them. Now, as soon as you lay out your goals, the letter A comes into being. Because as soon as you lay out your goals, the letter A stands for adjust your priority. I found this to happen. Now, I've been doing this now for 25 years, and here's what I found to happen. I found that every time I lay out my goals and predetermine course of action, I realize I have to adjust my priorities. Because you know what I'm doing? I'm doing things that are never going to get me there. You follow me? And I said, oh my goodness, John, why are you doing this? Because if you want to really get this is your destination, you're carrying extra weight. So predetermine course of action, lay out your goals, adjust your priorities. Okay. The letter N, notify key personnel. Very simple. Take your key personnel and sit down and talk to them and notify and share the vision. For example, if this is my team again, what I do is I sit down and say, hey, gang, here's what I'm thinking. Here's the dream. Here's the vision. What do you think? And if your team is good, you know what they'll do? They'll take what you give them and they'll give it to you back better than you gave it to them. Isn't that right? They always make it better. When anybody asks me, said, John, how do I know that I have a good team around me? I can tell you how you know you have a good team around you. Every time you give them something, they give it back to you at a higher level. They take and stretch and grow you. But you notify your key personnel. In other words, you have your key meeting. You have your meeting before the meeting. You know, that's a huge lecture in itself. But you got to always have a meeting before the meeting. Because if you don't have your meeting before the meeting, you're going to have a very bad meeting. Notify key personnel. Letter A, allow time for acceptance. Because it's going to take a while. So allow time for acceptance. I can promise you, people change slowly. So give them time to kind of digest and process that in their own mind emotionally. Letter H, head into action. Get going. I mean, there comes a time you go. And by the way, leaders have a bias toward action. And so leaders love the head into action part. They say, okay, now it's time. We've been thinking and planning long enough. Let's go. Head into action. And as soon as you head into action, the letter E comes into place. Watch this one. Expect problems. The moment you create movement in the organization, the moment that you take action, expect problems. And somebody asked me one time in the conference, I raised my hand and said, John, what? Okay, help me out here. They said, when you say expect problems, why should I have problems when I head into action? I said, it's very simple. Motion causes friction. And the moment that you head into action, somebody realizes they're going to have to make changes. Head into action. Get going. Expect problems. I got problems. You got problems. We all got problems. Okay, expect those problems because they're going to happen. Okay. And as you expect those problems and as you're moving forward, understand it. It's not because you haven't learned. It's not because you're being a bad leader. It's not because you haven't done things well. It's just because problems happen for all. So let me just take a little poll here. How many of you as a leader have at least one problem? I was talking to a leader recently and he was complaining about the problems. I said, don't complain about the problems. I said, think about it. That's why you have a job. If everybody was doing the right thing, probably wouldn't need you. This is a good thing that you have problems. But after expecting problems, always point to your successes. Always point to your successes, and the reason for that's very simple. Because you got somebody in the company who will point to your failure. Okay? This gives hope to your people. This encourages your people. And then finally, the letter D, daily review your progress. Daily review it. Sit down and say, okay, how am I doing? Am I farther along today than I was yesterday? I have found that the secret of navigation is preparation. And the best navigating leaders are those who spend time preparing themselves so that they can effectively take their people on the trip.
Okay. Now, this is a very interesting law. Okay. A couple of the things he said, anyone can steer a ship, but it takes the leader to chart the course. The secret to navigation is preparation. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd just like to take a minute and I'd like to go through that plan ahead acrostic. Okay? Because I see in that acrostic the downfall of too many pastors at certain areas within there. So the P stood for what? Predetermined. Your destiny, where you're headed, and how you're going to get there. That's where he said the secret is preparation. Change for change's sake doesn't work.
Yeah.
You have to know why you're changing. Okay. What's the next letter? And
Lay out your goals.
Lay out your goals. Okay. Go to the next one.
Adjust your priorities.
Adjust your priorities. In other words, why are you wanting to do this? Is it necessary now? Let me give you a story about that, going back to what's now One Church Turlock. When I went, it was called Northside Assembly of God. And the first thing that happened when I went there was, one of the first meetings I had, I've probably been there 2 days, and one of the main older men of the church, who's since gone on to be with the Lord, he set up a meeting with me. And he was an architect, and he had these plans where he had put out these plans of building a church sign. The church there had never had a sign. And he said, I've been holding on to these plans until you came on board. Can you give me the permission to go ahead and build this sign? We will pay for it. It won't cost the church anything. And I said, that sounds like a deal. And so the reason it's low like it is the building permit only costs $90 instead of $900 or whatever. But anyway, they built this sign, didn't cost the church anything. We're getting ready to put the letters on the sign, Northside Assembly of God, and I knew we needed to change the name of that church. And I knew when I found out how much it was going to cost for the lettering, because it was wooden letters that are $1,000 for those letters. And I thought, we've got to change the name of this. And I went to the Lord, and the Lord said, you can change the name now and probably not be here in 3 months. Or you can let the $1,000 be there and believe me that I can give you another $1,000. And I knew it wasn't time to do it. And so we put and then another man paid the $1,000 for the lettering. If I'd have just done it, I would have caused a turmoil that could not have been repaired. But then 2 years down the road, or 2 or 3 years down the road, when we changed the name of the church, we changed it without any complaints whatsoever. Why? I built a track record. Okay? So you have to, what was that letter? A? What was it?
Adjust your priorities.
Adjust your priorities. Sometimes it's not time.
Yeah.
What's the N stand for?
Notify key personnel.
That's the one I was wanting to get to. Notify key personnel. The problem with too many pastors is they get a vision, and it can be from God. But if you don't bring the key personnel along, you're going to do yourself a disservice. It's going to come back and bite you in the rear end.
Yeah.
You have to notify your key personnel. Not when you're telling everybody else, but you bring them along in the process. They can also help with the other people. You make sure they're on board. And if they're not on board, you find out why. And you deal with those issues before you bring it to everybody. That has hurt more pastors than anything else. Not bringing their key personnel on board. What's the next letter?
Allow time for acceptance.
Allow time for acceptance. Here's another big one. Sometimes the very things that we are promoting as vision from God, we have had on our crock pot for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we bring it to them and wonder why they don't accept it in 1 week.
Yeah.
Just like we were talking about board meetings.
Right. We need to give them time to process.
Yeah.
And sometimes part of that process is listening to their concerns.
Uh-huh.
Here's one thing I've learned about marriage.
No.
Here's one thing I've learned about marriage. My wife doesn't expect me to do everything she says. She just wants to know she's being heard. Right? And your people just want to know they're being heard. And when you give them that, it gives them time to process.
Yeah.
Next letter.
Head into action.
Head into action. Next letter.
Expect problems.
Expect problems. There will be problems.
Motion causes friction.
Right. There's going to be problems. And expect them. In fact, when you expect them, sometimes you have the answers before they come.
Yeah.
Remember Paul's mode of communication in the book of Romans? Diatribe.
Mm-hmm.
What was he doing? Asking questions that he knew they would be asking and then answering those questions before they asked them.
Yeah.
Expect problems. Problems are not bad unless they blindside you. You know, and you've heard this statement before where people say, never have they heard God say, boy, that one came out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting that. We should be the same way.
Yeah.
Next letter.
Always point to success.
Always point to successes. If you've got a big change coming, do some little things that are successful before you promote the big thing. Right? And then celebrate those successes. Bring them up before the people. Maybe it was nothing more than 20 people came out to work day and we did the work of 35 people. Celebrate the success. Celebrate what's happening. Okay? When we built that sign, we celebrated it all along the way. And I was finally able to celebrate the fact that most of you don't know this, but the letters cost $1,000. And one of the men in the church stood up and said, I want to take care of this. What are you doing? You're celebrating success. You're helping people see you've got a track record of success.
Yeah.
So that when you bring the big thing out,
To see success has already been a pattern.
they've already seen a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Here's another pattern they need to see. That when you have a failure, you admit it.
Yeah.
You own up to it. That even helps when you're presenting the big thing, because they've seen your transparency, that when you made a mistake, you lived up to it, and then God got you out of the mess. And what are you doing? You're building a track record. Yeah. Isn't that true? Now, I haven't had to do that too many times in ministry, but there have been maybe 2 or 3 times in 50 years of ministry where I've had to stand up and I've had to share my failure and be transparent and own up to it and accept it. And what did that do? That gave me change in credibility with the people. And what's the next one? Is there any more?
Daily review your process.
Daily review your progress.
Yeah.
You daily review it. You see how it's coming. You keep up with it. And if you've taken a few back steps, you recognize that and figure out how to move forward again. So this concept of navigation, the secret to navigation is preparation. And listen carefully to me when I say, sometimes it's easier for managers to operate in navigation than it is visionaries. Managers rather than change agents.
Yeah.
right?
That's why we need both.
That's why we need both. Any other questions or comments, thoughts before we close tonight?
This is something that I've noticed, like just recently, that my parents are a really good team on, because my dad is definitely a visionary. He can cast vision like there's no tomorrow. But my mom is very practical, and she's the very ABC person. And so, like, I just read this book like last month, which is funny. But and so this is something I noticed of myself that I'm not very good at. And so I've been observing the leaders that I'm around to see, like, okay, who's good at this that I can learn from. They're in my own house. But so
Yes.
Yeah.
And we need to recognize our weaknesses.
yeah.
One reason for this class is not just that we recognize our successes and our strengths, but we recognize our weaknesses.
Yeah.
So that we can work on them, right? Any other thoughts? Any other questions? People on Zoom, in class? It's good stuff.
Yeah.
What time is it? It's about time for class to be over. For those of you that are on Zoom and you're wanting to take the second class or observe the second class while you're deciding, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop Zoom for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then you can come back on a little before 7:45. But hopefully it's been beneficial. Again, those of you that are wanting to take this class that have not yet registered, and you're on Zoom, email me. We can connect on the phone, and we'll take care of registration. God bless you. Good to be with you.
Law number 5